Hi, folks. Robert O'Brien from O'Brien Guitars and the Luther Academy, and thanks for tuning in to another Shop Talk Live. This is number 31. Boy, how time flies. I can't believe time goes by so quickly. This Shop Talk is going to be a little different. My guest, all the way over there in Australia, Nigel Foster, is going to be joining us on screen here in just a few minutes. But because of the time difference, and to make it a little more convenient for us to do this, for example, it's Thursday afternoon, 2 p.m. in Colorado. And over in Australia, where Nigel is, it's 6 o'clock in the morning on a Friday. So it was going to be a little bit harder to do it live. So we just decided to go ahead and pre record it. So, like I always do, I like to make a few announcements before we get going. Let me just get you over to my website real quick. Let's get over there. And the announcement is that there is a brand new course. This one is the Luthier Tips du Jour Season 2. If you click on that, takes you over there to the Luthier Tips du Jour Season 2 page. By the way, if you buy that in conjunction with Season 1, you get 10% off if you buy them together. What Luthier Tips du Jour is, I started that way back in 2007, and then I started packaging the unreleased versions of these. And here is 50 unreleased videos. It will take me 4 or 5 years to release all of those. So if you want to get them now, make them part of your Lutherie library, now's the time. If you scroll on down, you'll see all of the topics that are available in Season 2. So go ahead and take advantage of that. Also, I like to call attention to my sponsors page. So go ahead and take a look at the sponsors. We have a brand new sponsor here at the Luther Academy. That is Total Vice. Some of you have seen the videos I've been putting out on social media with the Total Vice system, clamping system. So it's a fantastic system, and welcome aboard to the Total Vice sponsor there. Also, Acoustic Coffee, Duke of Pearl, Elevate, Lutherie, Pacific Rim Tone Woods, Glue Boost, Luther's Mercantile, and StewMac. Thank you for all of them. They help keep the lights on here at O'Brien Guitars. So if you need their products or services, please feel free to dial them up because they help us Luthiers out quite a bit. One other quick announcement is in April 16th, April 23rd, and April 30th, we're going to have the virtual French polish class. I just got done last week with the last session of the virtual voicing class. It was a great success. So if you're into learning and you don't want to travel, then this is a great way to do it. We do it through the Zoom platform. All you need is a mic and camera on your computer, and we can talk and converse just like Nigel and I are going to do here in a few minutes. Very good. I think that about covers it. Speaking of Nigel, let's go ahead and bring him up. Let's see. I've got somewhere over here. If I click a button, there he comes. Hey, there's Nigel himself. How you doing, Nigel?
I'm very good, Robbie. Yourself?
Great. You're all the way. What part of Australia are you in?
We're in the Gold Coast, which is about an hour south of Brisbane. Very
Fantastic.
nice.
Well, thank you for getting out of bed early and spending some time with us here this morning. Um, Nigel and I, we were just talking before we went on the air here. Nigel and I started YouTube videos about the same time. I mean, YouTube was in its infancy, and I think it was like 2006 or 2007 when I started doing videos. How about you, Nigel? When did you start?
It was about then. It may have been a little bit earlier, but not much. It
Yeah.
just occurred to us when I saw it that this is free.
Yeah.
It's a great way to advertise uh, my guitars. And I realized that most people who were interested in guitars also wanted to know how they were made. So I started off with just showing videos of me making guitars, and I
Right.
got loads of interest, loads of emails, loads of inquiries just from those early YouTube videos.
Right. Right. But my experience was kind of the same. I actually started YouTube as part of a literary course I was teaching at a college here in Colorado, and I needed audio visual aids for my students. So I started my YouTube channel originally for my classes at the college, and then it just took off. Something very interesting, and I want to ask you this question too, if you've experienced this. Way back when I started, I had maybe a dozen videos on YouTube to start with, and I would get between 3 and 5,000 views a day on those videos. Now, fast forward, here we are in 2013. I've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos, and I'll get between 1,000 and 1,500 views a day. So, what has happened? Have you noticed the same thing?
Yeah, for sure. YouTube is nothing like as effective for people like us as it used to be. I
Mhm.
think when YouTube first started, it didn't know what it was. It didn't know what its intention was, and now it does know what it wants to do. And what YouTube wants to do is to keep people on the platform for as long as possible. And
Right.
so what they do is they tend to favour the content produced by YouTubers. We're not YouTubers. I make guitars for a living. You teach lutherie and make guitars for a living. We're not full time YouTubers.
Right.
And when you see the sort of quality of content that people are producing now, who all they do is YouTube, that's who YouTube favours. So there isn't much you and I can ever do really to change that.
Right.
We have to use YouTube differently from how we did sort of 10 years ago or 15 years ago, whenever it was.
Right.
It's a different beast. It's a different beast now. It was easy for me to get like videos with 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 views,
Mhm.
and now if I get 1,000 views, I think it's done okay.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
just how it is.
Yeah. I've kind of got the
You
same
just have to
experience.
Yeah, it's to be expected. I mean, now there's a lot of kids in the broader woodwork world. There are people who still get 200,000 views. It's incredible, but they are just they're people who have a workshop and they make videos of upgrading their workshop for the wider YouTube audience, and that's all they do. It's
Right.
just
Right.
they buy a tool, they use a tool to make something to hang the tool off, and they just make loads of videos like that, and
Right.
that gets the big views.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you just have to, yeah, it's just how it is.
Let me back up just a minute here and explain why Nigel is on the shop talk with me here. The reason why is because recently my last shop talk was with Ian Davlin, Doug Proper, and Bo Hannum. And the topic was social media and how to use social media to promote your business. Shortly thereafter, Nigel sent me an email and says, "Hey, I've got some pretty strong opinions on this and have a lot of experience. And so I want to bring up a book that Nigel has written. Let me see if I can just bring this up. Here's a book that he wrote. How long ago did you write this particular book, Nigel?"
I wrote the first one, I think, in about 10 years ago. I
Yeah, it's
wrote it
been
10 years ago. I
yeah, it's
didn't
been
start
quite a
selling it
while.
until yeah, but I didn't actually sell it until about 5 years ago. That
Okay.
was the first one. So I wrote it and did nothing with it for 5 years, and I can't even remember why I dragged it back out. But yeah, I actually wrote it on holiday, I think in
Yeah,
2013.
I remember you telling me that. And that was the first book, Making a Living in Lutheran. And by the way, if you guys don't have this book, I'm going to put some links in the video description box below the video here where you can purchase this book as well as other books that Nigel has written. So this one was
Mm.
fantastic, Making a Living in Lutheran from Amateur to Professional. He recently did a follow-up to that, Making a Living in Lutheran, Money and Marketing. And that's the one he contacted me about. And it really piqued my interest. I'm like, oh my God, we got to get Nigel on here. So that's why Nigel's on here. So first of all,
Mm.
why did you write the follow-up book, Nigel?
Um, well, the first one did pretty well. I've sold a lot of copies of that book, and I got some nice emails about it, and it was definitely helpful to people. So I thought, what's another aspect of guitar making that
Hmm.
there's nothing being written about, and it's this. It's how do you making guitars is a really fascinating hobby. It's a really nice way to spend your time, but it's only a living if you can sell the things. You've got
Right.
to be able to sell the guitars. Um, and a lot of guitar makers, because we're artists, don't like to think about that side of the work. We just hope that our brilliance will be recognised and people will find us. But it just doesn't always work that way.
Right.
So how do you do it? How do you make a living? Um, you haven't really. I mean, I'm not particularly well known, but despite that, I've made a living. Well, for the first 15 years, I was working for somebody else, but for the last 20 years, it's just been me, and I've made a pretty decent living. So I thought I'd write about that.
Yeah, and I've read the book, and folks, if you don't have the book, I highly recommend it. It will really give you an insight of how to make a living at this. Nigel, I mean, he just said he worked for. You've been doing this what 35 years, I think,
Yeah, yeah,
and you've made a very good living. In fact, in the book, you even say, "Hey, I put my daughter through university. I have my no debt, house paid for. I travel, so it is possible." We started talking about social media, and social media,
Mm.
just my opinion of it, is it's a necessary evil these days to promote your
Mm.
business, and it's a free way of promoting your business. And you have some pretty strong opinions on that. We started talking about YouTube. Can you elaborate a little bit on how you use social media to promote your brand and promote your business, and what works and what doesn't work?
Well, the first thing is it's going to be different for everyone. I can talk about what's worked for me, and certainly when I started, YouTube worked really well. Um, I was amazed how quickly it worked and how well it worked. That people who from all over the world would get in touch with us. I saw your video, and they would say in the emails, "I saw your videos on YouTube." That was the
Right.
first thing I would see. Of course, I don't get quite so many of them these days. So what I've done is I've basically just how we experiment when we're making guitars. I experiment with marketing ideas. So when a platform comes along, I'll try it out. I'll give it a few months. I'll see what the results are. And you have to find out what the results are. So when people get in touch, I'll ask them, how did you find this? And they'll often tell us. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. But I have an idea of how people found us. I'll try a platform for a while, and if it's producing results, I'll keep with it. And if it isn't, I'll stop doing it. That's the thing. Facebook is a very good example. I was on Facebook for quite a few years from the start,
Mhm.
and then I stopped. I stopped because I did a marketing audit. I thought, where's my work coming from? And I started adding up how many hours I was spending on YouTube. Now, we all know now that these things are highly addictive.
Yes.
So you might post something, you'll post something on YouTube, a picture of you making a guitar, and then you might go back a little while later to see if anyone's liked it. And you'll count your likes, and then you say, "Oh, I wonder what so and so is doing," and then you start scrolling, and before you know it, you've spent 20 minutes,
Right.
and two
Only
hours
20?
later, you're doing it again. 2 hours later, you're doing it again. I'm just
Right.
going to look up. I found it in here. I wrote it in the book about how many hours I spent the first time. Here we go. Um, I did not when I did an audit around 8 years ago. Actually, this would be about 2015 when I did this audit. One
Uh-huh.
glaring issue came up. Facebook, 288 hours of time on Facebook had produced £6,000 worth of work. It's
Yeah.
a lot of time. That's
Yes.
a lot of time. Now, what I recommend people do, because this is the thing, we say social media is free. It's not free. If you're spending time doing it, it's not free. Now,
That's right.
often you might do it you might do it in the evening, but you could be spending time with your family. You know, you could be doing other things. You could be doing things that are productive in the evening. So you have to give that time a value, some sort of value. I'll talk about how you can go about that. It's it helps you look at the reality of how much time you're wasting is what it does. So
Right.
basically, I put at the time an evening value of £30 an hour, which would be about $50, I guess.
Right.
So basically, I'd spent £8,640 worth of time for a £6,000 return. So that was a loss of 2,640 pounds. That's even before I do the work.
Right.
I still had to make the guitar.
Right.
um, so it just wasn't. It was so bad for us to spend so much time on Facebook. So I got rid of Facebook. I wasn't on it for years. Um, and I
Are you
only
back on it
returned
now?
to it when
Are
I'm
you
back
back
on
on
it
it
now
now?
because yeah, yeah. There's a forum I used to use a lot for the mandolins that I sell and for the
Mhm.
Irish instruments like the bouzouki and the
Mhm. Mhm.
mandolas and things. And it was really good, but it was getting quite quiet on that forum. And one of my customers sent me a message and said, if you're wondering why it's quiet on this forum, it's because everyone's moved over to a Facebook group. So a lot of the forums have been replaced by these little Facebook forums.
Right.
And I thought, I don't want to go back on. I just don't want to go back on. And but obvious that the work wasn't coming through this forum anymore. So I bit the bullet and I went back onto Facebook and I found the relevant Facebook groups and I contacted one of the lads who ran the Facebook group and we ran an interview with me.
Right. Uh-huh.
That was the first thing we did. Um, and he was so, oh, great. Yeah, yeah, we've been waiting for you. Because for this particular niche, I'm quite well known.
Right.
And then he started running interviews with other makers. It was really good. And within about the first month, I'd got 3 orders.
Oh, wow.
Um, and that was worth it because I'd also become much more disciplined about how I spend time on there.
Right.
So I look at a forum, I see, can I say anything that's going to be helpful to people? You know, I don't just go on there to promote my stuff. Can I say something useful? If I can, I do. If I don't, if I can't, I don't. Um, and I limit my time, so it's just a
Right.
few minutes every day.
Right.
Um, Instead of people post videos of my work and what have you, and it's just much less time consuming, and it's much more enjoyable, and it's much more effective for my business.
Right, right. Along those lines, Evan Gluck, famous luthier out of repair person out of New York, once
Yeah,
told me that he doubled his income when he stopped doing finish work. I think the same
uh,
thing can be applied to social media. If you stop doing social media, you could perhaps
yeah,
double your income because you have more time to put into the bread and butter, the fret work, the making
yeah,
the
yeah,
nut, making the saddle, things that will actually give you some type of return. Finish work, for those of you who do finish work, know that you really can't make your hourly wage at that. That's the first
mm,
comment I had. The second comment I had is we're guitar builders. You hit that on when we first started the interview here. We're
mm,
artisans. We're not business people. We know very little about business, but if you want to survive in this profession, you need to get up to speed very quickly on business and how to run a business. And you mentioned your time. So, my question is how do you figure out what your time is worth? Somebody once told me you need to figure out what your hour is worth and then base all your
yeah.
business decisions on that. How do you figure out what your time's worth?
Well, you can. There's different ways of doing that. Making and repairing are slightly different
Yep.
because when you're a repairer, you have an hourly rate which you can set.
Mhm.
Um, when I was back in England now and I was sharing a workshop with a repairer, he had a pretty high hourly rate, but it was very clear to me that he never charged it.
Right.
Um, and what I had to do was try and steer him towards actually charging what he said and
Right.
stop trying to pay people to like him, which is what he was often doing.
Yeah, I
He
think you
was he
mentioned
was
that.
often discounting things.
Didn't you mention that
Yeah,
in a Guild of American Luthier article a little bit back? I read it. I read an
right,
interview with you. I think it was in the Guild of American Luthiers where
right.
you actually talked about that, where you decided to kind of take over the business, even though you were working for him,
Yeah,
and you figured out
yeah,
that hey, people are coming in and just playing the instruments and chatting, and you're not getting any work done.
right. Yeah, yeah. That was a lad. I was just sharing a workshop with him, so he was repairing, I was making. And if anyone came in, he was the talker. It wasn't just the customers. They'd
Right.
come in and they'd just start talking, and nothing would get done. So I, I sort of, I was the boss for a week, and I sort of showed him how to reclaim his time.
Right.
And to be honest, he had a fantastic week that week, but his personality was it just wasn't going to stick.
Right.
So I couldn't do much for him. But for Megan, it's much more difficult to put a value on your time, especially if you're new, because really your time isn't worth much.
Right.
No one knows who you are. The price of your instrument is very much predicated on supply and demand.
Hmm.
How many can you make, and how many people want them?
Hmm.
I was having a chat with an English guitar maker a few years ago, and he used to teach guitar making at a course. And we were talking about how do you price. And he said, well, I look at the material cost and I think what is a reasonable hourly rate, and I add it all together, and that's what I charge. But what if nobody wants to pay that much? Then what do you do with your price? Does your price go up? Does your price go down? Your
Right.
price is very much dependent upon how many people want one, and how many people, and sorry, and how many instruments can you make?
Right.
How much you want to earn. That's This is where marketing comes in, because if there's a gap between what you'd like and what the reality is, you need to get more inquiries. You need to get more inquiries so you can get more sales,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that's the bit that the artist in us doesn't want to know about. But there's a really good expression I heard years ago, which is you have to be an artist amongst businessmen and a businessman amongst artists,
Right.
because both are vital if you're gonna try and make a living from this hobby, from what is a very nice pastime.
Right. Right.
Yeah. But
Fantastic.
how you
And
actually
in,
price,
go ahead.
I was gonna say how you actually do it. You start off, often what people do is they look at what else is in the market and they try and slightly undercut it.
Hmm.
You know, well, you can try that and it can work, um, but it's a bit of a gamble. It depends on your skill level. Um, there's a case study I did in the ebook, which is just it's a lesson to everyone. It was a very skilled maker, really clever, talented fella who was making a particular niche instrument, and he was brand new, so he thought, "I know, I'll go in with a really low price and see what happens. See if I can get established. That's what people think they're going to get by putting in a really low price." And all he marketed on was one forum, and it was he got 150 orders almost immediately
Right.
because his base price was $1,500.
Oh, wow.
I mean, yeah, he ended up with 6 years worth of work and 6 years worth of poverty.
Yeah.
He basically committed himself to 6 years of poverty, and he was just, what have I done? Well, he made some fantastic instruments for almost nothing, for not
Right.
much more than it cost to make them.
Wow.
Um, and I said, when you were, so obviously you had to raise your price. How many people were still interested once you raised your price? He'd had, out of 150 orders, he had 2 repeat orders.
Wow.
So no one was interested. Once he started charging a decent price, nobody was interested.
Right.
And unfortunately, he doesn't make instruments anymore. Um, he's got a proper job now, um, and he's a such a talented fella, and it just didn't have a good business head on him, and he committed himself to 6 years of poverty. Oh,
Wow.
that's
Wow.
yeah.
Um, let's
I
go
mean, this
back
is the
to,
thing, Robbie. Oh,
yeah.
sorry, carry on.
Yeah.
I
Did you have
was going
something?
to say,
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead with what you had to say.
yeah, I was going to say the relationship. How do you work out your price? Let's say you get 150 inquiries and you get 150 orders. That tells you that you got your price wrong.
Right.
you know. Now, if you get 150 inquiries and you don't get any orders, that also tells you that you've got your price wrong.
Right.
So what you're looking for is a relationship between how many inquiries you get and how many orders you get.
Right.
When you're starting out, that ratio is going to be pretty low. It might be, say, when I started out by myself, it was about 1 in 5. So for every 5 inquiries, I would get an order, because I knew I could make about 15 to 17 instruments in a year. So I needed sort of 17 times 5, whatever that is. That's how many
Mhm.
inquiries I needed in a year.
Right.
These days, I'll work on around about 1 in 15. So I think that's about, I get about 270 inquiries a year, and I get about 15 orders out of that, 15 to
Wow.
17 orders out of that every year. And
Right.
um, and that helps me know that my pricing's about right. I, in time, I'd like to increase that further, so it's like 1 in 20.
Hmm.
Um, but to do that, I need to increase the number of inquiries, and that's where the market. That's when you come back to marketing. You know.
Right. Let's go back to the social media aspect. You talked about Facebook,
Uh,
that you left
yeah.
it. Now you come back, and Facebook has evolved and changed. And now there's little groups that are niche groups where you can target. What about Instagram? Have you used Instagram? How do you use it? Does it work?
Yeah. Um, I do use Instagram, and I use it for a couple of reasons, and it does work, but not in the way that I thought it would. Um, I've got about 4,000 followers on it now, and I've done that within a couple of years, which is pretty reasonable. But they're nearly all guitar makers.
Yeah.
Nearly everyone who follows me on Instagram isn't going to buy a guitar from us. They're just
Right.
other guitar makers who are
Right.
enjoying the videos that I produce. So I thought, well, this is useless.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I can sell things to guitar makers. So I've got the ebooks, and I've got there's a little tool I sell for doing semi-hemispherical fret ends,
Right.
and I sell that,
Yeah.
and it's worked out really well. So in
Yeah.
that regard, Instagram's been really helpful. The other thing that I use it for, um, on my website, all the photographs have a certain look to them.
I just pulled up your website
Yeah,
too,
no,
by the way. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah. My mate Stu did that video. I like that. Yeah. So everyone's got a certain look to it, but it's not. I take lots of photographs of me making guitars that wouldn't fit in on the website. So
Uh-huh.
I use Instagram for that, like as a extra part of my website.
Right.
Now, what I tend to do is when an order comes in, somebody's decided they're going to order a Session King guitar, see, which is my tenor guitar, which is really popular.
Mhm.
I don't push upgrades at the start because it's often a big step for a person to order an instrument. You know, you've got an order. I'm very grateful for it. Um, Only when the time comes to actually build the instrument, which might be a year later, I'll say to them, "Have you thought about a few upgrades? What about this type of rosette or this type of wood for the back and sides?" And then
Mhm.
what I usually do is give them a few links on Instagram
Mhm.
where the photographs will be specifically of that upgrade. The photographs might not be of the same style of my website, so it doesn't make the website look untidy.
Right.
Um, and so I use it as a sort of external gallery that I can direct people to. And
Okay.
people might go for the upgrades, they might not. That's fine. Um, but it's I use it in that regard, and it's pretty useful. As far as selling guitars, I've never sold a guitar through Instagram, but I have sold upgrades through Instagram. Um, but I do think for electric guitar makers, it might be useful. Certainly for guitar shops, it seems quite useful.
Uh-huh.
Uh, they commonly get sort of 20,000 followers. I
Mhm.
mean, you've got about, I had a look yesterday, you've got about 10,000 followers on Instagram. That's very high for an acoustic guitar maker.
Yeah.
There's only a dozen or so people have got that. But in the electric world, there's loads of them. People I'd never heard of have got 20,000 followers, 30,000 followers.
Yeah.
Um, I've never spoken to one, so I don't know if it is useful for selling electric guitars, but I certainly haven't found it useful for selling acoustics.
Yeah. I found the
Um,
same thing on
I would,
I found the same thing on YouTube. What I do is when I get inquiries, I send them to YouTube's of videos of people playing my instruments, professional musicians that have my
right,
instruments, and that's a great way to market through YouTube. So I use it as a channel to send people to. You apparently send people to Instagram to see things. Um, Another thing about electric guitar makers, I've noticed that also on YouTube, where I've been running my YouTube channel since 2006, 2007. I've got just over 40,000 subscribers. There's guys that are electric
right.
builders that started last year that have 50, 60, 70,000. So I don't know what it
Yeah.
is with the electric guys, but they really like to see videos and Instagrams and stuff. So
They
now, how do
do.
you
I think the electric. Sorry,
go ahead? Go ahead.
I was going to say I think the electric guitar, because it is easier to make an electric guitar than it is to make an acoustic guitar, and you can do it in your spare room with very few tools, or you can
Hmm.
buy bodies off eBay and you can do it yourself.
Hmm.
I think it's a very big market, um, with lots of enthusiasts. So yeah, yeah, I think Instagram works for that. I think what else is there? Instagram and YouTube. Yeah, yeah, full of electric guitars. So
Yeah.
yeah,
For YouTube also, I when I do a major repair, I'll document the repair, make a
mm,
video about it, and put it on YouTube. And because of that, I've gotten guitars from as far away as Florida, all the way out to Hawaii, Canada. People sending me instruments to repair because they see a video I
Right.
did on YouTube. So I can actually track the business coming from that
Yeah.
social media source. Which brings up another
Yeah. Yeah.
question. How do you track the return on investment for your social media time?
You ask people. Often you'll be on an online form looking at buying something, and at the bottom it'll say, "How did you hear of us?" And it'll be, "Was it
Mhm.
Google? Was it this? Was it that?"
Right.
I don't have a form. I ask people. Um, what I do is, I just remembered the reason why I wrote this ebook in the first place was because I had to do an audit myself. I was wasting so much time
Mhm.
on social media. I wanted to know what return am I getting for this. So I designed myself an audit, and it involved finding out where all of my work came from. So I emailed everyone over the last couple of years and said, "Why did you buy from me? What was the process?" And I found out, so I could actually make a little table. I could look at how much time I'd spent on each platform, uh, how much each platform was involved in getting me work, and I could put a figure on that, the time I'd spent and the return on that investment.
Mhm.
And from there, I could say, well, I'll get rid of it. I can get rid of that platform, or I can concentrate on this one. And it's not a static thing, it changes because these platforms change and evolve all the time. I'm actually in the process of doing an audit just now, just to see where I am,
Right.
because I haven't done one for a couple of years. Um, And so I'm emailing people again. Why did you decide to buy? What was the process? Where did you find me first?
Right.
Because often when you ask guitar makers where does your work come from, they'll say, it's hard to say. Well, it's not good enough. It actually it can be quite easy to say. You just have to ask people,
Right.
and then you're not guessing. You're not
Right.
take the guesswork out of it. Just ask them. So yeah, I would definitely recommend spending the time ask people how they found you.
Right.
Um, because often we find ourselves repeating behaviours. I went to a guitar show once and I saw a chap and I was asking him, "How many guitar shows have you done?" And he said, "Oh, over 100." He's very proud. Uh, and I said, "Why?" And he suddenly looked, he said, I have no idea. He didn't know why he was doing it. And a guitar show is not a cheap thing to do,
No, it's not.
you
No.
know? Because you're paying for a table, which is usually not a bargain. Um, you're paying for hotels, you're paying for transport, you're paying for food, you're eating in restaurants, and you're not in the workshop.
That's right.
So it's usually, you're not going to get much change out of, say, 3 grand
Yeah.
in any currency um, from for doing a guitar show. So
Right.
you've got to make sure that something sells in that show just to pay for it.
Yeah.
Um,
Just to
and a
break
lot of
even.
people Yeah, 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 yeah. So I would really recommend people plan guitar shows a bit more carefully. It's I felt quite sad for one lad who travelled a long way, thousands of miles to a guitar show that I was a visitor at, and he'd gone there feeling it was going to transform his world and his business. And I don't know if it did, but I suspected it wouldn't because unless you plan very well, and that, for instance, you might arrange to meet customers, clients, and players at the show, you're basically just sitting hoping that people are going to notice you.
Right.
It's it's a tough position to put yourself in.
Yeah.
So I tend to, for instance, I'll only do a guitar show if the show is somewhere where I would like to go on holiday.
Right.
So the last guitar show I did was in Japan.
Uh-huh.
Um, I thought I fancy a week in Japan.
Right.
And is a really good show in Osaka. I think it's very well organized. The people who organize it want to sell guitars, and that's really important. They're much more interested in selling guitars than they are interested in selling guitar tables to guitar makers, which is often
Interesting.
the motivation behind the show.
Yeah, very interesting. My
I
experience my experience
mm,
with guitar shows, and I've done a lot of guitar shows over the years, Haven't done 100 of them, but I've done a lot of them. And my experience has
Yeah.
been that you first of all, you're out of your shops, you're not producing. As
Yeah.
being self-employed, if you're not producing, you're losing money. So
Hmm.
that's the first problem. The second problem is it costs you about 3 to 5,000 US dollars to get to the show. By the time you take in your airfare, or your driving, or your transportation, your hotel, your table, all that kind of stuff. And I would get
Yeah.
there and I would talk shop with people that are not interested in buying guitars because they're building guitars. So I would talk shop, and that's
Yeah.
kind of okay because that's the business I'm in, but they would not buy the guitar. However, all of my buddies
Hmm.
that were at the show showing their guitars had the same thing. They'd come up, talk about the guitar, and oh, after a few minutes, by the way, I'm building a guitar. How did you do this arm bevel? So
Yeah.
that's my experience, and it's a little different case for
Yeah.
me because I am in the teaching world. I teach, and that's how I make my
Mm.
living. But at the end of the day, it's costing me 3 to 5,000 US dollars to go out to dinner with my buddies. Now, I like my buddies,
Yeah.
but I don't like my buddies that much. That's an expensive dinner.
Yeah. It rings totally true, totally true. When I was in Japan, like, it was clear that most of the American lads who'd come over all knew each other and they had a great time.
Yeah,
But I thought, lads, you spend a lot of money to hang out together.
yeah, yeah.
Um, the other thing you got to do, I mean, there was one lad, one of the American lads who was in Japan. He was a really skilled maker, very nice lad. Um, but the guitar, he broke one guitar, which was very sensible when you're coming that distance. Just bring one guitar.
Mhm.
But it was so uncommercial. It was it was made out of very nice but quite plain wood. It was an unusual design that was a niche within a niche.
Yeah,
Um, what I'd done was I brought a finger style dreadnought out a spectacular figured Bubinga with a cutaway. It was just a very commercial guitar, and I thought it's probably gonna sell because it's a really fancy looking thing, and it was a great sounding guitar. And it sold. It paid for the show, it paid for the holiday, and the holiday was tax deductible. Or at least a big
right,
chunk of it was anyway.
right, right.
Um, so yeah, you've really got to think very carefully about handing over your money. This is the thing when you if you're handing over money, that's why we tend to get drawn towards social media because we imagine it's free, even though it takes up a lot of time. But the alternative is paying for marketing, like a guitar show, or paying for adverts, um, and it's very difficult to find value in these things that you actually pay for.
Right.
It's a little better now that you can click on adverts and you can track.
Mhm.
But I've tried it. For instance, I've tried advertising on Facebook. I've tried advertising on Instagram. None of it's paid off. None of it's paid off. Though I did meet one chap who makes again a very niche instrument, and all he uses is Google AdWords, and all he does is advertise in 3 Californian postcodes. That's
Interesting.
all he does. He's got three Californian postcodes that I presume they're wealthy parts of California that he
Uh-huh.
bombards with
Wow, how
adverts,
interesting.
and that's
I
all the advertising.
I
That's all
wonder,
the advertising he does.
is he from one of those postal codes, those zip codes, or is he in some other
No,
different
no,
area?
no.
So he's
He's in a
advertising
much
only to the
cheaper, more
high
affordable.
income bracket.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. He's basically, I presume, he's advertising it to Silicon Valley or something like that,
Yeah.
or
Oh, that's very
like
smart.
a nice wealthy town. Yeah, yeah, he is. He's a very smart bloke. Um, that's all he does, and he lives in a much more sort of beautiful part of America, but much cheaper.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I've never seen him advertised anywhere else. I was just in a conversation when we were talking about marketing, and that's what he was telling us. So, that's the beauty of things like Google Ads. You can actually target a specific area and a
Yeah,
specific demographic.
yeah.
Um, all of these things like Google Ads, Facebook Ads, they're very complex. Actually, you've got to learn how to use a particular platform.
Right, right, right.
So if you decide you're going to advertise on something, you need to work out how their advertising really works. You can't.
The interesting thing about social media and where this is all leading for us luthiers, and I was talking to a luthier recently about this. What's happening is we're not luthiers anymore. We're content creators, especially me in my case. I mean, I create online courses, but basically what we're doing is creating media. We're creating YouTube videos, Instagram reels, and shorts, and whatever. But at the end of the day, we're not guitar makers anymore, and it's kind of frustrating because this is literally a full time job, marketing yourself
Yeah.
on social media, trying to keep up with the technology and the algorithms and how things work. It's literally a full time job. Have you ever considered going out and getting a full time developer or web somebody to promote you on social media?
No, uh, for the simpler reason that there isn't enough money involved. I make a decent living, but if I had to pay somebody else, they'd probably be doing better than me. Um, so no,
Yeah.
um, so no. There's, I mean, there are people who get really wealthy making instruments. Um, I'm not really wealthy, but I make a decent living. I put food on the table. There's money in the bank. We've no debt. We live pretty well.
Mhm.
Um, but I wouldn't say there was so much slack in the business that I can afford to pay somebody. Well, because you're always gambling. I've got a friend who lives up the coast from me here in Australia, who brought a media company in to do just what you described, and they've produced. I think he had to give him $25,000,
Wow.
and he's got some really nice he's got some really nice videos out of it, but no one's seen them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Basically, this media company to me looks like somebody who was really good at making videos was thinking, how can I sell videos to businesses?
Right.
He's not particularly concerned about how do I drum up business for this business.
Right.
I mean, one thing that is worth looking at could be worth spending money on is search engine optimization.
Hmm.
Um, so that when people search for certain terms on the internet, that they find you.
Right.
Now that's if you put in handmade acoustic guitars, it's been the same people, and they're not big factories. It's been the same two or three makers who've been top of Google for about 10 years.
Hmm.
Um, and as I don't know, my guess is that they've spent decent money on search engine optimization because
Yeah.
that's probably the best way to keep yourself on the third, like in the top three of Google for 10 years is pretty remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
So good,
amazing.
look, good for them. Yeah, but that would cost you money. That would cost you that would be worth doing. But there's an expression I read in a marketing book, which is if you ever want to hide a body, do so on the second page of Google, uh,
That's
because
great.
people just look at the first page. A
Yeah.
lot of people just look at the first page.
Yeah.
So paying people, it's certainly worth paying for video content, and I do. Um, in that regard, if you what I use YouTube for these days, I do two types of videos basically. I do videos where it's me talking to the camera, and I'll be talking about something. I'll either be talking about a new model, a new instrument, or I'll be answering a common question.
Mhm.
Because I make a lot of octave mandolins, people will say, "How do you tune an octave mandolin? What strings do you use?" So I'll make a video of me the camera talking about how do you tune an octave mandolin and what strings do you use.
Right.
That does two things. First of all, it gets me inquiries. People say, how much are your octave mandolins?
Mhm.
And the second one is when I get asked the question, I can post a link to the video. So I haven't got to tell them. I haven't got to type it out again. I just post a link to that video. On the forums, the commonest question to do with octave mandolins is what strings do you use? How do you tune them? I
There
post
you
the
go.
video.
There you go.
The other type of video I do is demonstrations, good guitar players demonstrating my guitars, and
Uh-huh.
that I pay for. Um, and luckily in England, I knew a lad who was a superb guitar player, an excellent sound engineer, and then he learned how to do video. So I would take three or four guitars up to him, and we'd have a day of he would shoot the videos in the morning, edit them in the afternoon, and then charge me a fee. A pretty reasonable fee for the whole lot. I'm yet to find somebody in Australia who can do this for us. but I hope to. I mean, there's enough people here. There'll be someone who can do it.
Right.
And I've actually been sending guitars back to the UK just to do this because I still need these demo videos. So yeah, there are occasions when I pay for professional services,
Hmm.
but certainly I haven't paid a marketer. I've
Right.
spent my evenings rather than wasting them on Facebook. I've read a few guides to marketing to try and understand the topic a bit more, and I've condensed it down to make this audit. That's really helped me direct my energies a little bit more wisely. You
Right.
know,
What about traditional, like magazine ads or newspaper ads? I mean, I once heard a very, I sat at the Hellsberg Guitar Festival, and one of the presenters there was a luthier, very famous luthier, talked about, I put an ad in this magazine, I think it was acoustic guitar, and I just do it. That's just what I do. Every month or every quarter, whatever it comes out, that's all I do. And then it takes several years to get some type of result. Have you done the traditional advertising route?
yeah, I tried it, and I just didn't like spending that much money for no obvious return. Those ads in acoustic guitar magazine are not cheap,
No, they're not.
you
They're
know,
very
even
expensive.
in the market. Yeah, yeah, and they're not clickable. This is why print is suffering so much
Yeah.
because I have no I put that advert in acoustic guitar magazine, and when I do my audit, which I did, no, I was advertising in uh, a couple of magazines, and I was advertising in an online magazine where the
Mhm.
advert wasn't clickable.
Mhm.
Um, and I had no way of measuring whether that was working or not,
Right.
and it
Right.
wasn't cheap. So I stopped doing it. I thought
Yeah.
there are so many ways of advertising now which are measurable,
Mhm.
which are clickable. You can, if it's a clickable ad, I'm interested. If it's not, I'm not anymore. So it must be really hard to sell print advertising these days. It must be
Right.
very hard.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I think people did this when there was no alternatives.
Right.
You know, you just put the ad in the acoustic guitar and it's branded, so people see it every month.
Right.
But I also wonder how much time do you spend looking at guitar magazines? When I was a kid, I used to spend loads of time. These days, I will literally flick through. I'll maybe find two articles that I'm interested in, and
Right.
that's it. I'll probably never look at the magazine again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so it's not to me. It doesn't strike me as being good value. That's
Yeah.
the thing.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm gonna bring up your book one more time here. Let's see. Where is that?
Mm.
Making a Living in Lutherie, Money and Marketing. And this is an ebook rather than a traditional print book, talking
Mm.
about traditional and ebook. This is an ebook that's downloadable. And if you don't have it, once again, the link is going to be in the video description of the video here. Highly recommended. Making a living in Lutherie, money and marketing. How do you know, Nigel? And I get this question a lot. People want, how do
Mm.
I know when I can make the transition from a hobbyist, an amateur, into begin selling instruments? Do you have any insight on that?
Well, the first thing I would say is, do you need to? Um, I got an email from it was the girlfriend of a chap in Australia who was an amateur maker,
Mhm.
and she wanted to come up, fly up from the south of the country to come and see me to give the lad a pep talk to encourage him in his efforts. And this is a great country, Australia, and if you're a plumber or an electrician, you can do as well as a lawyer in this country. You
Uh,
know, it's a great country for what they call a tradie. Yeah.
right.
Um, and I said, if what is, yeah, I didn't ask what his job was, but I was thinking if this lad's got a trade, tell him to stick to that and then do guitars as a really enjoyable and can be quite profitable pastime.
Hmm.
Again, in the case studies, there was one chap he was selling guitars which are actually more expensive than mine, and I've been doing it a long time. And just through back and forth in the email, it became clear to us that this was not his full time job. It wasn't. I don't know what his full time job was, but it clearly wasn't guitar making.
Right.
Now, let's say you're doing it as a hobby. and as a hobby, you can make 4 guitars a year. Now, you can easily have a 5-year waiting list at four
Hmm.
guitars a year,
Yeah.
you know, and all of a sudden, wow, so and so's got a 5-year waiting list. Now that's that social proof that it's like nobody wants to eat in the empty restaurant, you know.
Right.
You want to go at the one that's really busy next door. They might be both making the same food, you don't know, but it's
Right.
that social proof. If there's no waiting list, I mean, I've seen this at guitar shows when you see a fella who's got 7 or 8 guitars on a table. I think that's 7 or 8 unsold guitars, mate.
Yeah.
You know, that's a guitar collection. I don't, if you have one guitar, you have one guitar, you know, and that's it. It's either this or the waiting list. That's your choice. Um, so that's the first thing. Is I wouldn't necessarily. Do you have to make the transition? Now it
Mm.
could be that you really hate your day job. Well, you're gonna have to make some decisions. I would suggest that people, and I think I said this in the first ebook, repair. There is no shortage of guitar makers out there, but
Right.
there's always a shortage of good repairers.
Hmm.
You know, if you can, and you don't need to market that much for repair. Um, I think I heard Ian Davlin say, you hang your shingle out and the work will come in.
Yeah.
The skill in repair is learning to say no to the jobs which don't pay, um, and dealing with difficult situations.
Yeah.
There's a great lad who does, he's a guitar repairer not far from me. I don't like wiring, anything to do with wiring. If I've got a guitar, one of my guitars to wire, I don't do it. I take it to him.
Right.
Now we've got a great relationship. The job's always easy. I pay him immediately. I'm the perfect customer for him. Um, but he's got a shop full of jobs which he should be sending back
Yeah.
because some of them have been there for 2 years. Some of them he started a job, it went wrong. It's a
Yeah.
cheap acoustic guitar that needs a new bridge, and the bridge pulled. And there's loads of these little jobs, but he's such a gentle fella. He doesn't like giving people bad news.
Right.
It's a personality trait really that he needs to work with. He needs
Yeah.
to, because all these unfinished jobs drive him mad.
Yeah.
They get to him and they're filling his workshop up. So that's the thing. If you can learn how to deal with those difficult situations, repairs it, you can make a very good living repairing guitars,
Right.
and then start making them. Let's say I knew one lad in Germany who repaired in the morning. So he made guitars in the mornings and he repaired in the afternoons.
Oh,
He
interesting.
had a very clear split because musicians don't get up till the afternoon. So
Right.
that's when they came in with the repairs.
Right.
And in the mornings, every morning he was building. And then when the repairer, a person came in with a repair, they'd see one of his guitars hanging on the wall.
Uh-huh.
Oh, what's that? It's one of mine. Can I try it? Of course.
Sure.
Is it for sale? Yeah. So I would gradually make the transition.
Right.
Uh,
Fantastic.
you'd have to be pretty. So that would be my advice. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned Ian Davlin. I'm going to give Ian Davlin a plug here real quick. He runs a group called the Looth Group, Looth Group. Do a Google search for it. It's a bunch of repair and builders that have formed a group through the Zoom platform, and he offers a subscription-based model, and you can dial into all of these live video chats and stuff. So it's very interesting. Check it out. Highly recommend it. Ian's a great guy and a great repair person. But recently, I was on the group there and listening to one of the Zoom videos, and the guy mentioned just that. I think he was from Nashville, and he said, "Hey, if you want to make a living at Luthery, move to Nashville." I mean, there's so much work. You also mentioned
Yeah.
learning how to say no, turning down work. I on the Luthery Academy website, I have a course about repair and restoration, and one of the lessons in there is entitled "Just Say No." So learn
Mm.
learn how to say no because you can get yourself in trouble real quick. Um, Nigel, we're starting to run out of time here. I try and keep these at about an hour. There's so much we could talk about. I need to probably have you on again for a part two, and maybe we could even do it live next time rather than actually
Yeah.
pre-recorded. But you mentioned, I'm going to show you the ebook one more time here. How
Mm.
to Make a Living in Luthery, Money and Marketing. It's an ebook. I will have the the links in the video description. But you mentioned case studies, and I just want to call attention to the book. There's a bunch of case studies in there that I found fascinating. Can you elaborate a little bit on how you developed those case studies and what they're about?
Yeah, I was just talking. I observe other people's marketing efforts,
Mhm.
you know, um, and I just reached out to a few people, some who I already knew, and just sent them a little, asked them a few questions about the marketing efforts they make. Where does your work come from? Um, Most of them didn't know where their work came from.
Yeah,
Uh, the ones who are the, and it was very clear to me, the ones who are the most successful, they're the ones who knew where their work came from. They're the
yeah,
ones who knew what they were doing with marketing. Um, it's there was some. All of the people who I interviewed were doing world class work. All of them. They were all excellent makers, and a couple of them were only just getting by, and
yeah.
it was just simply down to their marketing. Um, there's a couple of case studies I didn't put in, but there's just observe people, just observe what they do and the sort of messaging they put out. I made so many mistakes earlier on, probably did myself some damage, uh, really. But these days, I try to be a little bit more um, thoughtful about how I post on social media.
Mhm.
Um, but some people seem to have it naturally. They're just very, very on message all the time. Um, there was a great one that I didn't put in the book where a fella, rather than post on social media himself, what he tends to do is find advocates. He has sold instruments to people who themselves are very active on social media.
Uh-huh.
Now, it's much better if you've got a customer who's always on forums saying, Nigel's guitars are the very best. Look at this, look at that, than me going onto a forum saying, my guitars are the very best. Look at me.
Yeah.
It's having an advocate, somebody who's a really happy customer. Happy customers are definitely worth cultivating, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and if they're active on social media, that's really valuable.
Mhm.
Um, so this particular case study, the fella had took a design which already existed. He kind of copied it, up, updated it, made it a little bit better, said it was a homage to. Then, and the instrument that he'd copied belonged to this chap who was really active on social media. So this fella's really excited. He then goes onto social media saying, "Look, we've updated this old design." And he basically he was saying, "Would you employ a person to do your marketing for you?" He didn't have to. This fella was doing it for him. This
Right.
customer,
Right.
because he
Right.
was so
Fantastic.
enthusiastic about this. It really was. It was. It was. It was. I don't know if he'd given it thought that he'd cultivated the situation, but it worked beautifully. It worked beautifully. It was a really nice exercise. The instrument looked superb, sounded superb, and there was a really happy customer who was telling everyone about it.
Wow.
So yeah, that's
That's a
that was a good lesson.
yeah, great lesson. Great lesson. Well, Nigel, thank you
Mm.
so much for coming on, and we're going to have you back on. We're going to do another shop talk down the road. I'd like to do it live so we can actually take some questions next time from some of the
Yeah, yeah,
viewers here. I think that would be fun if you're up for it and want to do it. Once again, go get Nigel's
yeah, for
book.
sure.
Let's get Nigel's book here, Making a Living in Lutherie, Money and Marketing. I'll have the links in the chat box or in the video description there. He's also got another one, Making a Living in Lutherie, from amateur to professional. And also on his website. Do you have that tool on your website, Nigel, for doing the fret ends?
What's that? Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's on the. There's a section for tools. Yeah, it's there.
Let me see if I can pull that up. I'm on your website here. Let's see, Luthier
It'll be under.
Tools. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see if we can pull that up here real quick. Give you a plug for that. The semi-hemispherical fret ends the easy way. There's a YouTube video there, and he's got a great
Mm.
tool that will help you do that. There's the tool. You just put it in your drill press, and it forms the end there, lickety split, and fantastic. So that's another something that everybody needs to check out. Thank you very much for. Oh, where'd he go? Hang on, I'll get you back up here.
Yeah.
There you are. Thought you
There.
disappeared on us. Thank you very much. Nice round of applause for Nigel. Oh, oh no, that's the wrong one. That's snoring. There it is. I think somebody went to sleep during this thing, but nice round of applause for Nigel. Thank you very much, Nigel, for coming on. I certainly appreciate it.